It's very difficult for the average citizen to find out what actually is going on, because none of the public health officers, none of the media are actually covering what's actually going on. They're not covering the facts, which was a major reason why I wrote this paper. I mean, it was one of the reasons I wanted to just show something to my friends and family about what actually was going on, and where they could find data and where they could find out what the truth actually is.
Oh, it's not enough to do nothing. It's time for us to do something.
I think the reason why people don't oppose it, and it's exactly the same as it is here, I'd still say the majority of the population are completely behind the lockdowns. And this comes down to the assessment of risk. And here we have to go back to last spring. And when the pandemic was declared, the benefits of locking down, restricting freedoms, stay-at-home orders, isolation policies, the benefits were the perceived deaths that you would either postpone, delay, or even prevent. Well, what were these numbers? The numbers were based not on any data, because there was no data. The numbers were based on models, these particular epidemiological models that we all know so well now. But, models, it's a matter of garbage in, garbage out. And that turns out to be the problem that happened last spring, that the models rested on a set of assumptions, and those assumptions turned out to be drastically wrong. The models, for example, the fundamental problem I'll address initially is that all of these models, it sounds even bizarre to say this, and you might even think that maybe I'm lying, but the models assumed that people are like rocks, that they just go about their business regardless of what's happening around them. And so if I'm visiting the store and interacting with people 7 days a week, and there's a terrible virus around like smallpox, I just keep going about my business as if the smallpox virus was not there. Well, that just turns out to be completely wrong and false. And that assumption alone generated these astronomical predictions about the numbers of deaths. And when combined with excessive reproduction numbers and excessive infection fatality rates, and when combined with assuming that 0% of the population had immunity to the virus, it just led to these kind of ridiculous forecasts. So if you're going to say that in Canada, 260,000 people are going to die in the next 3 months, well, of course, every reasonable human being is going to say, man, maybe I should stay home.
Those original forecasts, my understanding is, I think the name of the place they came from is the London Institute.
The Empirical College of London was the earliest ones, and the ones that received the most attention and had the most influence among governments.
Yeah, I believe both Boris Johnson and Donald Trump's administrations leaned very heavily on those. And I've written articles previously about, I can't remember his name, but the guy who was essentially in charge of those.
Niels Ferguson.
Niels Ferguson's, thank you. You're familiar, of course. That he was the same guy who vastly blew out predictions of the deaths from mad cow disease. And his models had already been proven not fit for purpose before they were relied on 18 months ago.
He didn't have a very good track record. And he also has no formal training in epidemiology. He's a physicist. A lot of people, it's not that somebody can't be wrong in the past and be right today, but there's grounds for skepticism. But regardless of his past record,
that's exactly the point. There should have been skepticism. This is my understanding of what the scientific method is all about: is healthy skepticism to attempt to disprove a theory or a set of assumptions until there is no room left for any doubt. But we've never been given the benefit of the doubt that we can think for ourselves, and we've been treated like rocks.
well, that's how we've been politically treated. So this is one of the interesting things, though. So we basically instituted lockdown around the world at the end of March last year, but by the middle of May, and certainly by the beginning of June, we knew a lot. We knew that the virus tracked a normal mortality. That is that, it wasn't killing children. It wasn't killing 50-year-olds. It's killing people that have already reached, their normal mortality for their given health. Mm-hmm. So we knew that. We also knew that the forecasts were completely wrong. That, Sweden was supposed to have 96,000 deaths by July. I think they had 600. I mean, that's not off by a little bit. That's off by an order of magnitude. So we knew very early on that these forecasts were wrong, and therefore the benefits of lockdown were wrong. But the problem wasn't sort of the science not working. The problem was the politicians not responding to the science. Yeah. And the other thing that's happened, I'm sure this has happened in New Zealand. It certainly happened in Canada. It's very difficult for the average citizen to find out what actually is going on, because none of the public health officers, none of the media are actually covering what's actually going on. They're not covering the facts, which was a major reason why I wrote this paper. I mean, it was one of the reasons I wanted to just show something to my friends and family about what actually was going on, and where they could find data and where they could find out what the truth actually is. Yep.
Now, you mentioned Sweden. That's something that I'd like to go down the tangent of just for a moment, if you feel comfortable to, if you've researched it enough.
Sure.
Certainly, I covered their preference for trusting people rather than mandating and micromanaging all behavior. They're basically saying, look, here's the information, here's our recommendations, but we're not going to put you in jail and, run you over with riot police if you disobey these directives. And there's a large amount of criticism, especially from conservatives, who were a little bit more trusting of the experts, and they basically said, yes, but look at the greater number of deaths that Sweden is having than comparable nations with more severe lockdowns in their region. The lockdowns work because they're saving lives, and Sweden does have a higher number of deaths. I actually haven't myself even looked into how Sweden has fared overall so much further down the track compared to those other jurisdictions in their region of the world. Can you give us an update on how they've done in comparison to policy and outcomes?
So, first of all, the cumulative total number of people who have died per million of the population in Sweden is almost identical to the cumulative number of people per million who have died in the European Union. So compared to the rest of Europe, Sweden did exactly the same. That's the first thing. Second thing, the excess deaths. Now, your audience, if they don't know what an excess mortality is, they should look it up. So in any given year, there's an average number of people that are going to die. And there's an average number of people that are going to die based on their health rate. And, the number might bounce around a little bit. And if it goes outside of a certain bound, we say that there's a statistical increase in the excess deaths. So Sweden has ended up with just 1% excess deaths over the whole year, which is almost nothing. Almost nothing. It's hardly even noticeable. Now, the question is, initially, though, in the months of March and April of last year, they did have a number, their excess deaths were high for that month. And the reason turns out to be, so lots of people looked into Sweden. First off, the number of deaths from COVID-19 last spring really depended on, there were several major factors that explain it. One was, what was your 2019 flu season like? And Sweden had an exceptionally light flu season in the fall of 2019. So a lot of people that would have died in 2019 in the fall ended up dying of COVID and other related things in the spring. So that was one major factor. It's got a terrible name. People call this the dry tinder effect. That there's just
No,
a
that
lot
makes
of.
sense. Australians are very familiar with
You're
dry.
familiar with dry tinder, yes, of course you are.
Yeah.
Just like in British Columbia, we protect our forests and leave all this wood stock in there, and it blows up on us.
That's right.
So that was one major factor. The other major factor is the average age of your population, average health, etc. So Sweden had a number of characteristics that hit them hard in the spring, but after that they did fine. Now, interesting enough, a lot of people say, well, what about Finland and Norway, which had so much lower mortality? Both Finland and Norway have a characteristic that's similar to New Zealand. They're almost islands in terms of their ability to restrict their borders because there are so few border crossings. But the other thing to note about Finland and Norway is they also had less stringent lockdowns than Sweden did. So they're not cases for, they have lockdowns and they had lower deaths. They had less lockdowns.
Why did they not get the same media attention for?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. And there are other countries in Europe that had much less stringency than Sweden as well. It might have something to do with it, right off the bat. For some reason, Sweden got this name of having zero restrictions, which was not true. They had some restrictions. They never had mask mandates. They didn't shut down their elementary schools, etc. They're sort of middle of the road, restriction-wise. But they were picked off. It might have come back again to Ferguson and the Imperial College of London model in that they made a stark prediction about Sweden, namely these 96,000 deaths. And when Sweden, I think the reason why Sweden did not lock down as hard as others was mostly constitutional. They just didn't have the authority to do it. And I think they became a cautionary tale among pro-lockdown folks. And
there's debate about the authority that's been claimed in various places around the world. I know in Australia, there's many legal challenges to the lawfulness of the directives, and many of the governments are walking away from the charges and fines that they'd laid and not willing to contest them. And one would presume that's because they're not willing to have the precedence of defeat, destroying the illusion of authority.
Yeah, we have several lockdown challenges in Canada as well. I'm not a lawyer, but my reading of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is that, you can only violate that charter under a demonstrable and sufficient threat. And I don't think any government around the world has demonstrated.
Foreign military invasion is about the only reason I would support that. What I do support is government advice, public debate, transparent science. Show us your models, show us your assumptions, show us your evidence and the data you're working from, and let us contribute other variables to the conversation so we can all arrive at an informed conversation. Stop treating us like infants or rocks and start treating us like educated adults.
Yeah. I have a sort of a political economy theory about what's going on.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation. You know what? We have to fight back against the censorship of big tech. Would you like to help? You can do that now by heading over to the website, goodsource.news. We're going to end the conversation here on this channel because we need to make sure that we're independent and not reliant on big tech. Head over to the website, goodsource.news right now for the rest of this great video.